everyone, welcome. I just want to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the land of the Wurundjeri Willem clan of the Kulin Nation, always was, always will be Aboriginal land. So my job is to introduce myself. So hopefully there are faces behind the screen that I can't see that I've met over the years. But so I've spent 20 years on HREC myself. In the sexual and reproductive health area, the disability area, and currently I'm the Deputy Chair of the Victorian Government's Department of Justice and Community Safety, which covers areas of prison research, juvenile justice and the court system, as well as it's the portal to the NCIS, the National Coronial Information System. So I've loved it, I've enjoyed it. I'm passionate about involvement in HREC, and I've valued the journey I've been on. I'm also a researcher, partly at the Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre in an autopsy-related project. I'm part of the University of Melbourne's Gender and Sexuality unit. I previously have been a board member of Praxis, and my involvement in this project goes back to that time, but I'm currently an independent research consultant. So next slide, and back to Sally.
Thanks, Philomena. So I know from being involved today that many of you have experienced Praxis and in many different ways as collaborator, as participant in one of our workshops or our courses. So I'm going to go quite quickly through this slide, but just to let you know that Praxis commenced in 2015. And during the past 7 years, we have had close to 11,000 students enrolled in our courses and offers. And we work across three key sectors, which are the research ethics, and the clinical trials sector. And obviously HRECs are a very important part of our participant group. And we have run HREC Essentials, which is Australia's leading HREC course for over 5 years, and you know, had a terrific number of enrollments and some great feedback. And this course, next slide, please, Sarah. Great. This particular project has been in the works for a long time. Philomena and also Melanie Gentgall and Ian Kerridge, members of the Praxis board, have been very involved in building this project, and it's taken a long time, hasn't it, Philomena, to get where it is today? Yeah, so you can.
No, I was going to say, do you want me to launch into the background?
Yes, if you could launch into it, that'd be great.
Okay. So I think one of the things that came to mind when I was on the board of Praxis, and we all discussed with equal enthusiasm, was that annual reviews and evaluations are commonplace practices in boards and councils everywhere. And there are a lot of resources out there for that kind of evaluation. But I guess the question we asked was, well, what about HRECs? As a committee structure, we're similar to some of those, you know, boards and other forms of committee, but we're also very different because we're not about service delivery or profit making for our stakeholders. We're about a deliberative process around ethical review. So we did a bit of a search at the time and found very little, and certainly very little in Australia that was relevant to or helpful for the specific purpose of HRECs, as I said. So in 2017, under Melanie's watchful eye, Praxis embarked on the development of a HREC evaluation tool. We believed that it was in everyone's interest that HRECs function optimally in order to facilitate high quality research and to best protect research participants. And many HRECs who've been in contact with Praxis in a whole range of ways had expressed a wish to evaluate the quality of their work and consider how it may be improved, which I think is fantastic. So the feeling out there was, we want to do this. Some HRECs had certainly done it and were doing it, but a lot of HRECs felt like, well, you know, what's the best way to do it, or what's the way that's going to best suit us? So in late 2017, Praxis embarked on a bit of a consultation process in Melbourne and Sydney to explore the why and the how, and to discuss with a range of interested people what constitutes best practice in evaluation. So, some of the outcomes of those consultations, when we asked both groups, why do we need an evaluation tool and process? Some of the things that came up were to enable sharing of information across the sectors about what is best practice, to facilitate creation of a standardised approach to ethics review. And all of you know that in the literature, that issue around what is a standardised approach, so that each, researcher gets treated, in a similar and appropriate way, is an ongoing question for HRECs. To promote recognition of the importance of developing HREC networks, so, communication between HRECs and, that inform and change our practice. To facilitate critical reflection. I mean, that's what we expect researchers to do. Why would we be exempt from critical reflection around our practice, and with the goal to really improving our deliberative processes, and to enable, a movement towards best practice as a kind of a culture of process and change. So we did some development work on the basis of that consultation in 2018, but we simply ran out of resources to complete the project. So we picked it up, well, Praxis, I'm not part of Praxis anymore, but Praxis picked it up again in the middle of this year and found resources, and we've gone forward. So next slide. Can we have the next slide, Sarah? Great, thanks. Okay, so we know there's 200 plus HRECs currently operating in Australia, and they're very diverse across the university sector, the hospital and health sector, the not-for-profit sector in terms of community service provision and so on. So in our thinking about our approach, we wanted to recognise that there is incredible diversity and there's no size-fits-all approach to doing a self-evaluation of HREC. And we also wanted to acknowledge that there are different levels of commitment or resources available. So institutions need to support wherever possible HRECs to do this, and they need to resource them to do it because, there may be cost in terms of time, in terms of the actual resources if you bring in, external or independent facilitators, providing lunch for a day if it's a day-long process and so on. So we wanted to keep those in mind when we develop the tool. And on reflection, like from my perspective, the Department of Justice HREC is the first HREC I've been a part of that actually has had an annual review day scheduled every year. That, half the day is us reviewing our performance and the other half the day is presentations from others around issues that are relevant to our particular focus in terms of the research applications that we review. So next slide. So the approach of the tool is, right from the start, Praxis was very clear. We want it to be freely available, to be free. We didn't want any cost involved. It was kind of Praxis giving back to this sector, both of HRECs, but more broadly researchers. We wanted it to be simple to use. So we don't want manuals. I think everyone's got manuals on the shelf and, how often are they pulled out and, worked through. We wanted something that would be simple to use and really blended with the existing knowledge and capacities of the HRECs themselves. And we wanted to offer resources but also continue to update those options. And I think we have a really strong commitment to, starting with some resources, but as they become available from either Australia or overseas, we'll continue to add to that. And certainly we would ask people who use the tool or are interested to forward those to us. Okay, next slide. So HREC Essentials course has been running for at least 5 years, and I've been involved in the training module associated with that. And one of the things that I have asked in all of those training courses over that time is, what do we currently do well as HRECs? as members of HRECs, and what could we do better? So I'm going to give you a little bit of a flavour of some of the feedback I've had over the last few years when I've raised that with HREC members who have been part of the training. And perhaps mentally, as you're listening, you might want to tick off or cross on some of the issues, and they're just a portion of what people have told me through the workshops. So I think it's really important that the HREC evaluation tool is not a deficit model. So we're not going, HRECs don't already do things well. I think we acknowledge, many of us, that there are things that we're really proud of in terms of the HRECs that we're part of, and they're things that we recognise that we already do very well. And I think that's an important aspect of an evaluation, to recognise what we do well and how we can continue to do that well. Recognising the quality of the work we do. And some of the comments that workshop participants have said over the years is things such as, we work hard to put participants front and centre in our considerations. We are seen as collaborative and communicate well with researchers, and researchers acknowledge that. We invite researchers to meetings to discuss issues wherever appropriate, and as a way of facilitating good communication if there have been problematic, reviews from the researcher's point of view, or researchers really want to raise particular issues with us. We are thorough in our feedback to researchers, both positive as well as critical comments. And that's often not something that some HRECs do. Often researchers get the letter, hopefully in a timely fashion, and it's like all the things you need to fix or all the things you need to answer. But certainly in my Department of Justice, we do acknowledge when there's been an application that we think is outstanding or has really addressed some of the issues around risk well described the risk mitigation strategy. So I think all of us appreciate positive feedback, whether we're HREC members or researchers involved. The role of the chair is clearly pivotal in all HRECs, and so the comments include, the chair ensures everyone can and does participate in discussions. Comments such as, we do induction well, and I think things have really improved in that space, particularly for those who come onto committees who are not researchers and have not had involvement in the past. The legal reps, the pastoral care reps, the lay people. Good induction, quality induction is key. And the little things that matter, like, somebody said in a recent workshop, our letters are sent out very quickly to researchers within a couple of days. So, we all know the long process that researchers go through in developing applications, and getting a response after a meeting is really positive. What we could do better, some of the comments workshop participants said, we have limited representation of the communities commonly represented in the research we review. And I think the review of Section 5 of the National Statement is starting to really ask HRECs to consider that. How well is the representation of potential participants represented on the HREC committee? This is a common comment. The process online is complicated and difficult for researchers to navigate. So different states have got different kind of processes, and different organisations do. And if we can make that better for researchers and easier, you're going to have less disgruntlement and more engagement with the process. Our submission deadline is too late. We only have 5 days from receipt to, committee meeting, so that's too short a time to review. Comments around certain people dominating the discussion, and the chair does not manage this well. A common comment, the workload's too much, or our meetings are too long and therefore don't ensure that we can do our best in the discussion of the review. Comments such as, we don't keep a record of decisions on complex issues that we've engaged with to ensure that we are consistent in our approach in future applications. We just rely on memory. This is a newer one, this next comment. We could include a younger group of members. We're all in the +50 age. We're just too old. And then a final one, we're concerned that we have little capacity or processes to monitor research. And I think we'd all probably agree that the monitoring of research is a challenge for HRECs, both in terms of capacity and resourcing and procedures and protocols. Okay, next slide. So just moving to the framework of what we're offering here in terms of the tool, and then Sally's going to take you on a bit of a tour of the tool. So we are in the business as HREC members of assessing risks as well as benefits. And so apart from why I do self-evaluation, that's an important thing to start with, because there can be risks in doing this kind of thing. You know, underground tensions or issues can arise if we have an open discussion in certain ways about, you know, what we could do better or what we're not doing well enough. So a benefits and risks assessment is actually something we're very good at, and therefore we should think about when we're planning to do a self-evaluation. And certainly that can go even to issues around timing. You know, this year has been exhausting. Is this year, at the end of this year, our Department of Justice, HREC, has said we're not doing it at the end of this year as normal. People are exhausted. Some of our committee members are working as frontline health workers. It's just too much. So we've deferred ours to next year because the risk of it not going well or just not being robust enough was really there. Then we've got a series of questions around preparation. So purpose and scope. So one of the things the tool suggests is you consider the difference between an evaluation, which is really a judgment process, and an audit, which is really about measuring against predetermined sets of standards. Now, you can do one or you can do both combined, or you can just, you know, work out ways to incorporate aspects of each. But it's important to kind of differentiate between what's simply an audit, which is, you know, a lot of services do around auditing against measurements, expectations, targets, and so on, and evaluation, which is really kind of measuring practices and making judgments about how well they're going. So when we come to methods, we look at some of the advantage, and it's not an exhaustive list because you will all have your own ideas to add, but what are the advantages and disadvantages of different methods? So there are informal methods that are really valuable, you know, that are often applied in board or other committee settings, such as, you know, 10 minutes at the end of a meeting, have an informal discussion around, well, how did that meeting go? You know, what could we change? Other issues that arose that we need to kind of address for future meetings. And then there's the formal methods. And, you know, generally they come along the lines of surveys, facilitated discussion, as I mentioned earlier, you know, having an independent person in to come and, you know, facilitate a planning day or a review day. And then there's methods such as interviews that can be conducted with individual members or collectively with groups of people, like, you know, the HREC committee, and then, you know, the research office or the HREC office, you know, and bringing together some of that kind of input. And then who to be involved? Well, I think that's really important. Like, is this kind of evaluation process just for the HREC members themselves, or should it encompass other people who have an engagement with HREC committee, such as, you know, the administration side, the research office, the governance office, researchers themselves, internal and external? Like, do you want to kind of do but a selective list of researchers who have submitted in the last 12 months and ask them how they found the process and what worked well or what could have worked better? So that's around, you know, thinking about that. Who do we want involved? And it can be very simple or it can be quite expansive in terms of what we might do. And in fact, you know, some suggestions include interviewing participants of research that has been approved from your HREC. And then there's outcomes. So it's worth thinking about this from the start. So you can do an evaluation, whether it's, you know, a small kind of process or a larger process. Or there's thunder happening all around me now. I hope you can still hear me. And like, who owns the findings? Where should those findings go? Like, or the minutes of the annual review, like, are they to be kept internal to the HREC, or are they findings or, you know, conclusions or summaries of an evaluation day or process that should be shared with others in a transparent way to indicate and, you know, to people, look, We're continually looking at ways we can improve our process. We're recognising the things we do well. And, you know, as a part of that, we're transparent around this process and some of the findings that we've had. And Sally will talk about resources, but that's the final aspect of the tool. So I might hand over to Sally at this point.
Great, thank you, Philomena. I'm going to see if the storm has passed over and I can start my video. So sorry, you might need to let me do that. Philomena has really covered the next slide. So Sarah, we might go to slide 9. And the next 5 slides, I'm really going to, as Philomena said, walk you through the tool and give you a sense of what that looks like and how that might help you in doing your own self-evaluation. So let me just, Sarah's let me start my video. There we go, I'm back. Okay, fantastic. So what I'd like to talk about is really the key features of the tool, and Philomena has touched on those. Basically, we wanted to provide a toolbox full of resources for you to enable you to do a self-evaluation. And that includes a very simple survey, a much more detailed online survey, readings, references, and a process guide, which really steps you through the whole evaluation process. We're very clear that we want it to be clearly sectioned, very, very easy to navigate, and flexible and tailored. If we could have a look, Sarah, at the next slide. This really just outlines some of the benefits to you, and this is what we started off with in developing the tool. We wanted to be able to affirm the strengths of HREC committees, to identify areas for improvement, to enhance the quality and effectiveness of committees, to renew a sense of collective purpose in the committees, to allow an opportunity for committees to update and refresh their knowledge, to have this as a tool that would help to strengthen relationships and also to increase transparency and accountability. Now, with anything and with any good process, there are some risks, and we do outline those in the tool. Some of those risks may be bringing to the surface issues within the committee that might need to be managed within the committee, and people need to be mindful of that. Others might be highlighting processes that are not working, but obviously at the end of the day, that's a very good thing. So next slide, please, Sarah. If we just have a look at some of the resources. We've started off with some very practical downloadable PDFs, and we will add to these. We've also got the surveys that I mentioned, and I'm not sure, Sarah, if you could just open that link and see how quick the bandwidth is, and if not, we'll abort that mission and go back to the slides. But I'd just like to give you a quick look at what the survey looks like. So we click on that survey link, and again, bandwidth may not allow us to take a really comprehensive look at this, but you can certainly do this after the presentation or on another day. Basically, you enter your information there, and it takes you through a series of questions, which you then give a ranking on. There's an opportunity to comment. And once the survey is completed, there's an opportunity to submit that. The survey then gets emailed back to you. So this is, again, a self-evaluation, and it's an opportunity for each individual to do the evaluation and either have that as a resource for themselves or to come together as a committee in a facilitated way to look at the feedback and comments and look at, well, how can we improve given this? So it's a great opportunity to compare perspectives, experience, and to use that to really strengthen and build the committee, and also to highlight any issues that need to be addressed. So thank you, Sarah. We might go to the next slide. You can just click on that one. I see I've frozen again. I'm hoping that you can hear me. I've frozen again. I'm hoping you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Philomena and I joked about this. We're having the most ridiculous storm here in Melbourne. And we said earlier, lucky it's happening now and not during our presentation, but there you go. Anyway, thank you, Sarah, for driving this. If you can see, if we go to the next slide, please. Okay, this is the tool in totality, and there's a link for you to click on. And given we're having the bandwidth issues that we are having, I don't think I will click on and guide you through, but certainly invite you to do so following this session. This tool can also be found on our site. It's clearly listed in our top menu bar as the HREC self-evaluation tool. So please go ahead and have a look at it, have a play with it. As mentioned, this is the launch and it's a work in progress, so we really welcome your feedback, any thoughts on improvements. I'm sure there will be some that people uncover, and we really welcome that as an opportunity to continually improve this. I should mention this is a free tool. I don't think I said that up front, but it's something that we are providing to the sector to help HRECs self-evaluate more effectively. So let's just continue, Sarah, to the next slide. I've only got 2 more slides here, I think. We keep going. Just invite you to insert any questions into the Q&A, and Philomena and I will address those. Oh, Sarah, thank you. Sarah has shared in the chat the access to the tool, so you can go ahead and look at that. Yes, so please go ahead and insert any questions into the tool, and we will, into the chat, and we will answer those either now or offline post-conference, and make sure that you have those questions answered. So Sarah, if I could go to the next slide, please. So this is something as conference partner, we're really pleased to be able to bring you this offer. We were looking at, well, what could we do other than launching this tool as a way of supporting? How can we support the sector at this time after a very difficult year, and with all the challenges that Philomena has mentioned? So we're offering this particular very short-term offer up until the end of December for anybody who is a registered conference participant and their organizations to access a significant reduction in our course fees. So I invite you to take note of that code. I think Sarah will also put that into the chat. And if you are interested in looking at our HREC Essentials course, our Research Essentials course, and our upcoming workshops for 2022, please go in and have a look and take advantage of that. Okay, so yes, Philomena.
There's a couple of questions for you, Sally. Does Praxis get or store a copy of all the survey responses? Just wondering about confidentiality.
We don't store, currently we don't store, and certainly if we did at any point want to store, we would have to ask permission. Privacy is obviously very key, and we have people like Philomena and people on our board who are very, very passionate and very, very involved in privacy legislation and regulations, so you don't need to worry about that.
There's another question in the chat. Will there be the ability to know which HRECs have completed the evaluation to begin communication for awareness of improvements that can enable to support each other? That's a good question.
That's a really good question. It's something we haven't built in as a feature. So again, something we're going to have to consider. At the moment, it is up to individuals to share their results within the HREC. But it's a very interesting question, and one we'll take on board.
I think what would be interesting is if those HRECs that do, use the tool provide feedback, positive or negative, or constructive, or want to have a vent, and by that way, Praxis may well know, which, not who literally, because you wouldn't share that, but like what kinds of organisations are using it and whether there's particular issues dependent on the HREC, you know, being a small or a large one or a university versus a, you know, hospital-based HREC. I think it would be really interesting for Praxis to get a sense of where the feedback's coming from and the nature of the feedback. So I think there is that facility, isn't there, Sally, to do that?
Yes, there is. And again, we'll build on all of this. And that's why it's so important to get qualitative data from your experience. So I encourage you to continue to provide that as you use the tool, because this is, you know, first launch and first time that's been publicly available. So we imagine that, you know, throughout the next 3 to 6 months, we'll be continuing to make improvements on this and build on it.
There's a humorous comment. Is there an evaluation tool for the evaluation tool? Which there was another comment. I think have I missed it? It seems to have gone.
I see one here.
Does the tool also collect feedback from researchers? Well, I think that's up. I mean, I think that's a process of consideration for the HREC itself. It could, you know, take the content of the survey, but it's really quite specifically focused on the HREC itself. And I think that's a really good idea for a possible future tool, Sally, around, and there's nothing to stop HRECs from developing their own and using some sort of survey for researchers to give feedback to the HREC. So I think we should list that, or you should list that, Sally, I'm not Praxis, as a development of a potential tool, because that's something that we didn't actually consider.
Yeah, absolutely. We're getting some great suggestions here already, Philomena, which is fantastic.
Yeah. There's a question there from Arthur. Arthur has his hand up. So Arthur, if you want to ask a question, feel free. But while Arthur is deciding, let me ask you, Philomena. I mean, I'm on a few ethics committees and have done evaluation from time to time, and it's useful, like on a meeting basis. So I guess this is getting more granular data over the whole life of a committee, I'm assuming. But do you think there's value in doing evaluations on a monthly basis, or, you know, every couple of months, just to try and keep yourself honest? Is it possible to action them rather than having a whole planning day, do you think?
Yeah, can I just say something, and then I'll hand over to Philomena, who will answer that comprehensively. When we looked at this, what we've recommended, particularly for the survey, is that, you know, this could be done on a 6-monthly or on an annual basis, because you don't want to have, you know, review after review. But I will hand over to you, Philomena, to just give your view on that.
I think that is one of the suggestions in the tool, that you do it at the end of each meeting, or you could do it every second or third meeting. Certainly I've spent 30 years on not-for-profit boards, and, you know, it's certainly in the last 20 years, it's something that we've commonly done, because the value of that is you get the issues at the time, whereas, you know, 6-monthly or 12-monthly, you need the time to reflect, but you don't necessarily take the time to reflect if you're someone filling in a survey. So some of the really hot current issues can be missed, but they can be picked up in a regular end of meeting, discussion, and noted and either brought to the addressed at that time with some discussion, and then brought to an annual or 6-monthly review process, or actually resolved at the time. So some of them are quite small, like they could be like, can we change the time of the meeting? So they go too late into the evening, we're exhausted and we're feeling like we don't trust the quality of our review. But sometimes they're quite significant, like look at changing an aspect of the application form because it's not capturing the information that we think we need in some instances to do a good evaluation. And that's more of a bigger process.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Philomena, because when I heard you saying the Department of Justice, had a whole day session, I just went, oh my God, I cannot imagine how difficult.
Hey, we get a free lunch. What are you, no complaints from us?
It's a free lunch, Philomena, you know that.
Yeah.
Now, Mamta Tanwar from my own ethics committee, I think, wants to ask a question. So Mamta, if you're there and you want to ask a question, just unmute yourself. Hello? Darn it, that's a pity. Not to worry. So let me ask you another question. I've always kind of thought that one of the reasons for having this HREC conference is because we're not really well served with, ways to support ethics committees in Australia. And we kind of were, but, the resource implications for say, the NHMRC has, eroded that ability to, for committees to be oversighted to the extent, or at least certified ones to the extent possible. Like, is there a need, do you think, for, and I hesitate to say this, sort of a committee of committees, the Australian HREC Association or something to be doing something like this? And I think it feeds into that question, which is in the chat box there, Sally. Would it be possible for Praxis as an independent organisation to be commissioned to undertake the evaluation? Independence is sometimes an illusory thing, by the way. But anyway, I'm interested in your response to that.
Yes, absolutely. So can I answer the second part of that question?
You may, of course.
Absolutely. Praxis do undertake, as an independent organisation, reviews, and Philomena has been involved in many of those. So we are certainly able to do that. Philomena, did you want to say anything more on that?
No, just that it's certainly the case that for some HRECs where there are significant issues identified, that, an external or an independent review is the way to go. And sometimes that is the best way to go in terms of bringing to the fore a different lens. I think all of us recognise, and certainly for me, you can spend years on an HREC. You start to kind of form your own channels of thinking, you get really familiar with each other, and sometimes that fresh lens is a really valuable thing. So, yeah, that is definitely an option that is appropriate.
Yeah. Gordon and Sarah, there's a message in the chat I've noticed about will there be official communication about the tool via email, because the link will disappear at the end of the conference. So, not sure if we can share. Are you happy for us to share that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Nicole. Good to hear from you, Nicole, and thank you for your question. And we will, we can do this. In fact, Sally, you might wish to do this tomorrow morning when you're talking about Praxis, for example. That might be not a bad place to do it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I'm just looking at the other questions. So there's a question there, have you published this work? It's terrific. Thank you, Lena. Yes, the work is available live, and it will be continually changing and improving on our site. So that's just the Praxis Australia website, praxisaustralia.com.au. And it's under our toolbar, clearly labeled as HREC self-evaluation tool. You can find it there.
And I think, Sally, there's a plan just to have the guideline aspect of it available as a PDF as well, so that people can download a PDF, acknowledging that there can be changes in the future, but sometimes just having it in front of you is useful.
So, Philomena and Sally, I've just noticed this question, but it goes to a wider point, because an ethics committee, of course, comprises 7 categories, and in this case, lay members, and members are there because of their own experience, but they will have different perspectives. So does your tool capture those perspectives, or is it a sort of general kind of perspective that it's capturing?
Well, there's certainly an opportunity to provide extensive feedback, and that is by way of commenting. So there's the capacity to have that feedback for lay members to share their experiences in that way. I'm not sure if there was something in particular that was from Francis, whether Francis had something in particular in mind that was more specific than that. Maybe Francis, if you can type that in, if there was something more than just sharing the experience via comment. Philomena, did you have a?
I think that's a really important point, but it's not currently available, because what that suggests is that there's a way for lay members to network with each other. If I'm understanding the question, it would be beneficial for lay members to have a mechanism to share experiences and develop knowledge in their roles. And it may be that that's something that comes out of self-evaluation of an HREC, like that the lay members say, you know, we'd really like you to support us to connect with lay members of other HRECs. You know, and I think that's one of the things that's come out of the Praxis HREC Essentials, that lay people are a very diverse group. You know, I think we've moved in some ways from the practice where, oh, really, they're just really researchers in disguise, to a move towards really, engaging with, you know, genuine lay people because of the value of that perspective. And some HRECs I know have got 4 or 6 lay people because they see the value of that, because, you know, in the past there's often been a focus on, you know, the input from researchers as such. So I think that the lay perspective is really essential, as is the kind of pastoral care one. And on the Praxis course, there's I think in Unit 9 or 10, there's a link to a short article about one of the people from the faith who was on as part of a faith membership, who did her PhD through interviewing people in that category across HRECs. And it's a really interesting read. It's only a short article, but her PhD, I think she's probably gone on to publish, because that's often the area that HRECs have the hardest job in terms of recruiting people from that kind of pastoral care perspective. Certainly the HRECs I've been on, that's been one of the challenges. So that in itself is a category, apart from the lay people, that really, through that PhD, had an opportunity to share their perspectives and their motivations for being involved. And it's a really interesting read.
Yeah, so Philomena, I mean, it's a good point, but I have to say, you know, in keeping with my general theme of the national statement just being guidance, I honestly think that the pastoral care role can be provided by people with a much broader perspective than just reading it as, a church minister or a Catholic priest or an Aboriginal elder. There are many wonderful people that can provide a pastoral care role. But you know what? If we are actually constrain ourselves, you know, to the words in front of us, I think we're actually dissing, you know, way too many people and making life remarkably difficult for ourselves. So I do think we have to be broader, and I think today has shown us that, amongst other things, we have to be broader in our thinking. And it does go to Francis's point, which was lay members have very different experiences. It seems to me induction varies. Some lay members are silent, to have discussions would be helpful. And Francis, yes, we did look, honestly, we tried to have a session on lay members, but, you know, I won't go into it, but let's just say reciprocity was required. And I thought, you know, for a free conference, I didn't think that was actually appropriate, but I do think that the involvement of lay people in research and in their views on ethics committees is certainly very important. And to get back to the theme of this, the views of ethics committee members in all forms is clearly something that's essential to be able to give Praxis and the rest of us an idea of how we should do better.
Gordon, there's a couple of questions around, you know, using survey tool and so on. And I just want to reiterate, like, these are suggestions. So like you could ignore the survey tool, the simple one, or the quite extensive one, which is really quite extensive, and just cherry pick or develop your own questions. So this is a kind of a tool that starts a conversation or continues a conversation and just prompts thinking. And you might go, oh no, wouldn't do that and that, but hey, it does make us think maybe we should ask questions around some of the processes we use. How effective are they? Some of the, you know, some HRECs have responsibilities beyond what's broadly defined in the national statement and go into other areas. And so you might want to add questions or, create your own questions. So this is not like a tool you should use. It's a prompt to consider the goal and the purpose of self-evaluation and the ways you might purpose it specifically for your HREC.
So
you haven't patented it then, Sally?
No, it's free. It's out there.
No, and in fact, on that note, I've just seen a question from Monica I'd like to address, which was asked by another participant on the call. And that question is, do we have to use the Praxis platform, or could the questions be inputted into our own survey tools so we can look at all responses from all members in aggregate and do a higher level of analysis? Monica, absolutely. We have put that up there. It's a free tool. The idea of that tool is to ensure that HRECs have a starting point to do this self-evaluation. We have a number of in-depth self-evaluation courses and offers. And certainly in our HREC Essentials, if you're interested in that, we can guide you to that. But this tool is readily and freely available. So if you can use it in a way that's going to improve the effectiveness and process of your committee, that's why it's there. So please do so.
So Philomena and Sally, I noticed a question on a comment from Tegwin Howell, whom I know. Hi, Tegwin. And she was talking about the value of using researchers in this survey. And I may have missed it, but did you say that you actually get feedback? Do you get any feedback from researchers on the not the efforts, but how they've interacted with the ethics committee, and to what extent does your tool take that into account?
No, I think I answered that, Gordon, when I said no, that was a really good idea and it's something practical.
My apologies. Yes,
but it doesn't mean that that's not something absolutely that HREC should consider and develop their own survey or their own interview process, because like when in the aspect that talks about interviews, there's no, when we consider, well, who's involved, you may decide, okay, it's really important to involve researchers. Will we involve them in the interview process? Will we have a separate survey for them? So that's one of the prompts we have, like, who's going to be involved? Is it just the HREC? Is it just internal staff who engage with the HREC? Or is it, researchers, or in fact, is it participants? Like, there are suggestions that I think are really positive around picking some sample possibilities in terms of participants as to how they, but that also could be something you leave aside and do as part of a monitoring process.
Yeah, I guess it's like a 360 review, I suppose. I mean, we did a survey at Metro North just to see what people thought of the ethics and governance, and you can frame questions to get certain answers, of course, but clearly people thought ethics was going pretty well, was quite quick, and governance was taking too long, usual stuff. But I think we have to be a bit more granular and say, well, did the questions you get from the ethics committee, were they related to justice, benefit, respect, merit, and integrity? And I always tend to go on the essential versus nice to have. I don't like nice to have questions. I like essential questions, because otherwise I feel like we're getting sidetracked and we're wasting researchers' time. So look, a really valuable tool. I mean, as you say, Philomena, I think you hit the nail on the head. Starting the conversation is just so incredibly important. And if we don't start the conversation, we'll never know. We'll always be introspective. And like I say, you get to the end of an ethics meeting and you think, oh my God, I need a beer or a glass of wine or something like that. And the last thing you want to do is evaluate yourself. So.
And I would add, Gordon, in terms of the tools, like there'd probably be nobody more expert than HREC members around construction of surveys. Around, like, hey, how many surveys have we looked at as part of our review process? We're really familiar with that. I don't think it would take much for HRECs to do that, or even, for instance, to develop an interview schedule. I mean, we've seen thousands, if not hundreds, of those. Like, these are things that we've got a vast array of experiences and knowledge about. And I just noticed, there is a final question, I think Sally, or not final, but is there still an external evaluation option as part of stage 2?
Yes, I saw that. Thank you, Melanie, who really start, was the nexus of this project. Yes, absolutely. We are looking at stage 2 and looking at what that may include. And obviously that will be a development and it's in progress. But certainly the option of an external evaluation is something that we will be looking at.
Very good. Well, haven't we done this one to death? Actually, no, the answer is no, we haven't done it to death at all. It's a fascinating topic. And I think, like, you know, HREC evaluation is something we know we have to do, but getting around to it is always harder than it would seem. I think what we might do is we might bring it to a close there, 3 minutes out.